Let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to Netflix vs. Cinema, the podcast that asks that question. Netflix or cinema, which one are you going to spend your money on? Nowadays, we have the Oscars coming out, we have Netflix getting all these nominations. Are things changing? Are cinemas going to remain the way we know for a while? Let's find out. My name is Tosin and I am the host, and I am based up in Coventry, well, near Coventry in the Midlands. And joining me on the Isle of Wight are Shaun.
Hello there.
And Sharon.
Hello.
I switched it up. I said Shaun's name first.
Yeah, you did. Caught me unawares there.
Yes. You think it caught you on? It caught me unawares. I didn't know. All right, cool. So those of you who might be listening to the podcast for the first time, what we do on Netflix or cinema is we go see a couple of things in the cinema, rate them out of 5. See a couple of things on Netflix, rate them out of 5. Put them up against each other in a number of rounds, usually 3, today 4, and then we take an average, and at the end of the time we say, right, Netflix won this week or cinema won this week. It's a cinematic boxing match. And those, if you've been listening to this usually, you'll notice that you notice maybe a bit of more of a brusque manner, a bit more business-like to my thing. I've even asked Shaun and Sharon how they are, because today we do not care. And that is because Shaun and Sharon, you guys have to head to something that is making a long awaited comeback on the Isle of Wight. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's the cinema quiz.
Yeah, the cinema
quiz. Our local cinema, they run a quiz. Well, they used to run a quiz every Thursday night, and they stopped it last summer. And they've started to give it a reboot, and so they're starting it again this week. And because we were sort of some of their regulars, we thought, well, we better go.
Oh, well, hey, look, I have a lot of affection for the Isle of Wight cinema quiz, because that is where we actually met. It is technically the birthplace of the Isle of Wight or the Cineworld on the Isle of Wight is the birthplace of Netflix versus cinema. So I have a lot of affection for that. Do you guys know who's going to be running it this night?
No, we think it's still Ben, but we're not sure.
Probably Ben, I think, don't you?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of the hosts come and go because we've outlasted them all.
How many years has it been? Loads. Thousands.
Quite a few.
Yeah, quite a few.
At least 8, I think.
Well, you make it sound like we're like Robert De Niro in The Irishman. Things come and go, but we remain.
We stay the same.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, say hi to them. Say hi to them, and if you see Dan, because Dan was the host when I first came along to the film quiz. If you see Dan, say hi to him. Hi, Dan. If you ever listen to this.
Yes.
Right. So, as I said, we are going to carry on, and we're going to try and do something that we don't usually do, and actually be, straightforward with our timing and all that kind of stuff, and go straight into it. So, I am just going to put a timer in, and we are going to kick off with our first film. Actually, I'll tell you through the films we're going to be talking about. But on the cinema side this week, we have 1917, Bombshell, Just Mercy, Seberg. And then on the Netflix and Friends side of things, we have the Bonfire of Destiny, Harlots Season 3, Vienna Blood, and Bojack Horseman Season 6. Right, we're going to kick off with 1917. And Sharon, I'm going to give you... Go ahead, tell us what this is about.
Okay, this is set during the First World War, and the 1917 of the title is the year. And this was the year that the German army retreated to what became known as the Hindenburg Line. But when they first started, because they built the fortifications behind their current lines, because their front line was so vast, it was stretching them very thin. And so they did a strategic withdrawal to the Hindenburg Line. And so basically we're dropped right in the middle of this, when the Allies, the British and the Allies, don't know what's going on. They just see the Germans retreating. Yeah. And some of the commanders along the front line think, hey, we've got them on the run. And they decide to do a big push. And our story starts basically with 2 Lance Corporals Blake and Schofield, when they're given orders to take a message to one of these regiments that's making this big push to say, actually, they're not in retreat. They've just retreated to another line. And if you attack them, you are going to find yourself in a whole heap of horrible trouble. And so we're sending you orders, this impossible order, to go and see if you can hold this planned attack, and they've got basically something like 12 hours in which to do it.
Yeah.
And part of this mission to fulfill these orders is to cross a part of no man's land, to go into one of these towns that has been occupied by the Germans, and to find their new front line on the other side of this, battle, basically. And so that's what our story is. It's set over the course of one day, and you follow these two lance corporals as they set off from their British trenches and then try to find their way to the new front line.
You see, now, Sharon, this is why I asked you to do this, because we know that, we will get like the historical context, because that was going to be my first question, because I know that your family was quite involved in, I think, both world wars, and so you know quite a lot about that and all that kind of stuff. So thank you very much, Sharon. And now, Shaun, I'm going to hand over to you, because I know you like your war movies, and you tend to watch all these things for things like authenticity and, have they got that right, and have the blah 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 Harriers got the right hat on.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. So,
okay.
So I'll hand it over to you for that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that point, it is pucker. Everything is pucker, even down to the dog tags being Bakelite and octagonal, and not your typical like American ones. So, I mean, a lot of I couldn't really fault anything in the way of equipment and all that.
Yeah.
There's one thing I thought they might have during that time. They obviously had motorcycles, and they probably would have sent a dispatch rider around. But I totally forgive that, because they might have done 2 or 3 things. But to me, this film wasn't really a war film. It was more of a journey. It was a journey. If you think of all and how it was shot, and so many references to Apocalypse Now. Did you at the beginning?
Well, I'm not an Apocalypse Now fan. So
Kilgore. And the bit, when he's in the town and there's it's all like psychedelic and
all the fire and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's got hit and all that. That reminded me of the Dolan Bridge. And but at the beginning, he says he actually calls twice. It's mentioned Kilgore. Well, Kilgore is Robert Duvall's character, and he's like a private. Oh, what am I going to do with you, Kilgore? So it was like, whoa! I've seen this twice now.
Oh, wow.
Because, and I can't fault anything to do with equipment, armor. Maybe the planes were a bit strange, but it was just the way it was shot. It was absolutely incredible how it was shot. It was just like,
all right,
wow, this is a marvelous piece of filmmaking. Filmmaking at its best.
All right, so you just mentioned how it was shot, and a big thing was made about the fact that this whole film is shot, and it's made to look as if the entire film is in one shot. So you mentioned, Sharon, you mentioned Schofield and Blake, and they're pretty much on screen for the end. Like you follow them. If it's not happening with them, you don't know about it. And so they're on screen for the whole thing. So I think Dean Charles Chapman and especially George Mackay are brilliant in this. But Sharon, okay, you told us what the film was about. What did you think about the film? Shaun has already waxed lyrical.
I loved it. I thought it was really good. I think for me, it didn't flag at all. You were with them the whole time. Because when I first read about this, the fact that it's like this one's almost like a long tracking shot, they have these very long takes. I was thinking, I don't know if I like that. But actually, I didn't even notice it beyond the first walk through the trenches. You think, hang on, this is a bit different. And then as you get into the rhythm of it, you don't even notice it.
That crazy scene was incredible.
Yeah, the fact that you don't ever lose sight of them. They're either in front of you or you're in front of them. They're either walking towards the camera or the camera's following them. So you never lose sight of our main characters.
Yeah.
And when you do, something awful is going to happen, because you normally have one of them. So one of them is always on camera, and so sometimes the other one is not. And you hear things and you don't see it because you're like one of the corporals, is that you only see what they see.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great film. It had me completely engrossed. And I was with them. I was moved by it. I was engrossed by it. Yes, I loved it. My only quibble was some of the officers were a bit sweary. I mean, I know that sort of, because say all my family were sort of military. They all served their time.
Yeah.
All of them. And my family are just not a swearing family, even the old soldiers. The strongest my dad ever said was thundering. If he got really cross, he'd that thundering nuisance. And he would never, ever swear. None of my uncles ever swore. So I find it a bit like when they say, all these old soldiers, they all swear. It's like, my family didn't. Well, but that's my only quibble, because I don't like that. And I think Well, hang on. My experience of old soldiers is that they don't swear.
They probably never do with family or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'd be exactly the same with that, because they had certain standards, certain values. But if there was ever out in a group, trust me, they swear. Even the paragons that people think the paragons of virtue swear.
Oh, okay.
I want to say that my dad didn't.
Oh, well, okay. Right. That's fair enough then. Yeah. So, anyway, because, well, yeah, there probably is people like that. But even, as I say, when, I don't know, call it a man's world or whatever. But so it's like me, I can be both ways if I want to be.
Okay.
Anyway,
that's my only tiny quibble. One of them, I just thought, hang on a minute, there's an awful lot of effing and jeffing going on here. Right, When all the books I've read about it, they may filter it for a different audience, but I've read so many books and they weren't that swearing, because in that the culture at the time wasn't part of the culture the way it is now. So that was just my tiny little quibble that sort of would take me out of the film in some ways, because I was thinking, oh, that's very, very, But that's just my only tiny quibble. But I couldn't fault the actual film.
Mr. Darcy, I don't think Mr. Darcy swore, did he?
Okay,
no.
Okay, guys.
I think
we technically speaking, we're out of time to talk about this.
Are you sure? Can't we give this one a bit longer and I'll cut down on Bombshell or something?
We can cut down on.
What did you think, Tosin?
What
did you think?
What did I think? Well, I think you guys might have seen on Facebook, but I came out with the film, and the first thing I wrote is, okay, this is the first film that I have seen in the last year that made me immediately think, okay, that deserves the Oscar. Because I know the obviously I'm into filmmaking, and I do a very, 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 very low level stuff of that for a living, but the technical stuff to make this film, you're like, how the heck did they do this? And so there's a bit of where I'm just watching them going, oh my God. And there's a bit where you just realize we haven't cut. It's just been like one shot. There's one particular bit where they go into like a sort of trench. They go into a trench, and there's like a massive puddle at the bottom of the trench, and the camera follows them into the trench. Then it goes along the water as they are walking along the side, and it comes back up the other side. And I'm like,
that's what I was talking about, the shell crater. Shell crater. That was amazing.
I just kind of like, what, how on earth are they? And the fact, and I think that usually when you have a film that says, like, I remember there was a film called Lady in the Lake, made in the sort of black and white MGM Gold Glory era. And the thing about that was that it's all done from a first person perspective. So the entire film is done from the point of view of this detective. And I remember that after a while, it feels a bit gimmicky, and you're like, but in this film, they managed to have a gimmick, if you want, that does not feel like a gimmick. That actually has a point to it. And like you said, Sharon, it's like you're there, like you're one of the privates in there as they're going through all this stuff. And it ends up being quite immersive. And for something that's like, that is essentially one shot, or made to look like it's one shot, I was surprised at how much they got into it. I was like, how did that? The bit where he's in the water, how did you do that? And the bit where everything is blowing up around him, that's all they watch. And then he goes down into the trench, and he goes into the place, and I was just in awe. I was quite frankly in awe of this film. And I love the fact that because of the way of the film, because you're following these guys, it enabled you to do the whole thing where they walk into this room, they meet this person. Oh, well-known British actor. He plays this role. He's there for 5 minutes. They go. You never see him again. They go and go somewhere else. Well-known British actor, there for 5 minutes. You never see him again. And but I thought that the film was actually really, really affecting. I thought that the performances were really good as well. I mean, I think the central performances, it's the fact that the first time you see Schofield and Blake, I feel like almost within 30 seconds, they've told you who these people are. They don't give you like a whole bunch of backstory that, oh, this person has this thing at home and this person is waiting for... They don't give you a lot of that, but you sort of know these characters. You look at one of them, and one of them has almost sort of like this sort of shell-shocked thing throughout the whole film. And the other one is kind of like, a little bit more of a cheeky chappy. And I just thought that the performances were great and filled in a lot of the space that the film doesn't give you space, because it's like, look, we've got to move on. We've got to move on. And it doesn't waste time setting things up. It just throws you straight into it. And even though I am not as big an Apocalypse Now fan as you are, Sean, I have to admit I did think this is a little bit, it's like an odyssey this film is not really. It's not really a war
to me,
film. It's an odyssey.
I mean, there were some lucky shots in it in certain places, and you know, which I could have, if I'd have had a different mode of head on, I could have said, that's incredibly lucky, or this hadn't worked, or that. But to me, it was a journey. It was a journey, an odyssey, if you like. You know, an odyssey of like like Homer almost. You know,
I think it has a lot in common with, like, you know, the Greek things like Odysseus.
Yeah, with Odysseus and all the people he met on the way. Yeah,
but no, I mean,
So
good film.
ratings. What do you rate it?
Well, it's got to be 5-star from me.
And I'm going to say, hands down, it is by far the best thing I have ever seen Sam Mendes do.
Yeah,
I think it's the best film he's ever made. As far as I'm concerned.
Actually, I'll tell you what's quite funny today, and it'll probably be on later tonight, 11:30 tonight on Radio 4. But at 4:30 they had the film program on.
Yeah,
and it was talking about, and they had you probably need to listen to it. They had the cinematographer on talking about.
Oh, Roger Deakins.
Roger Deakins. He is on there talking. So
I'm sorry, but if he doesn't get the Oscar for best cinematography, I don't know what will.
He's been robbed. Yeah.
But he's on the film. He's on the film program, which is repeated tonight about 11 or 11, something like that. Well, I'll probably be tucked away in bed.
Well, the thing is with Roger Deakins is that because you know he's got, like, you know, the record for the most Oscar nominations without winning. He's been nominated something like 13 times before he finally won one for Blade Runner 2049. And I think it's going to be a bit like, you know, London buses. You wait ages for one. Because if he doesn't get the Oscar for cinematography, I haven't seen any other film this year that matches it. That matches that what you think about what had to go into making these sort of like landscapes, like the bit where they're in the city and the whole city's on fire. I mean, come on. Anyway, so anyway, Sharon, what would you give it?
I would give it a very high 4. I would say it's not perfect for me, but it's up there. So I would give it a high 4.
Yeah. Okay. So Shaun says 5. Sharon says 4.
Yeah. Got to be Oscars all the way.
I think this is, as I said, this is the first film that I've seen this year. I mean, somebody kind of like when I said first film that I think deserves an Oscar. One of my friends, Tandy, who is in Australia, she was like, "Oh, Joker," and I was just like, "No, don't even do that. Don't even compare."
Doesn't really compare.
It does not even compare. I know a lot of people like that film. Quite frankly, I'm baffled, but yeah, it doesn't even compare. I just thought that this deserves it, and I was worrying about it. I was like 3, 5. And I think purely because I came out of the cinema going, okay, that's it. Just give that film deserves the Oscar. I'm gonna have to flip over into a 5.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So that is 1917 gone. As you can imagine, we could talk a lot more about that film because the film is awesome. Just go watch the film. Go watch the film and get in touch with us on Twitter or on Facebook or something and tell us what you thought as well. Because honestly, it is the film's a marvel. Now we're gonna go into Netflix and we're gonna talk about something called the Bonfire of Destiny, which I keep calling the Bonfire of Density, but.
Right, that is on Netflix.
Yes, and you saw it, Sharon.
I'll have to take this one. Yes, I saw this one, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. Again, it's like the last film. It's based on true events. I think Bonfire of Destiny makes it sound a little bit soapy, but it's a French drama, and the French drama is entitled Le Bazar de la Charité. Basically, it's based on the real events. There was a fire in 1897 in Paris, where there's this bazaar, a charity bazaar, as in the name, the Bazar de la Charité. It's run by the local Catholic community, and it was set up in this basically. It was like a prefab building, sort of wooden with plaster, with a stone facade at the front, and there's only one way in or out, and they had an early prototype cinematography booth where people could see like the early films.
Yeah. And
there was basically a fire started in this booth, and it spread ferociously very quickly, and in the ensuing panic, something like 136 people were killed.
Ooh.
Where they couldn't get out of the building, and the majority of them were women. And a lot of the aristocratic men who were with them, and the bourgeoisie, as they're called, who were with them, they managed to get out, but their wives and their daughters didn't. It wasn't unique. It wasn't entirely women who were killed. There were there were a few men were killed, but it was something like 6 men to 130 women.
Oh.
And this drama is about, basically, it's taking the lives of 3 women and how they were affected by the fire. One of them is like a matron. She's married to this really domineering politician, and you see the story through her eyes. And then you see her niece, who is this sort of young ingenue, and she's there with her fiancé and her family. And then there's her maid. And you see the drama as it's in 8 parts. As it's the first episode is the fire, and then you see the consequences of this, and it goes into the politics, and it goes into the scandal, and goes into their lives. And one of the real facts about this fire is that some people from the cafes nearby basically smashed in windows and went into the building and dragged some people out, and they made a hole in the walls. Whereas a lot of these, the wealthy and the privileged men fled for their lives. The chef and the cook from next door and some of the busboys, they were the ones who sort of went in and risked their lives to bring out others. So there is an element of class in this, an element of, there's they're called the anarchists. There's this sort of political movement. So you get a snapshot into the life of Paris at the end of the 19th century and the lives of these women, and how this unequal society, how it was sort of basically shone a light on the fact that how unequal the society was in those days. So that's basically it. Yes, it's an 8-part drama. It's in French with subtitles, and it follows the lives of these 3 women and in the events after this fire.
All right, so a bit like how you were talking about 1917 and how, well, from what you're saying, like with the language they were using, it sounds as if they made a film set then, but supposed to speak to people now, because that's the way most people speak now.
Yes.
Would you what you're talking about, this like the whole sort of the class level and everything like that? It seems to be a bit timely. We know how people are talking about class divides all over the world and all that kind of stuff. Would you say that it's kind of something like that's been made about that time, that almost like the more things change, the more they remain the same, or however you say that in French?
Well, yes, absolutely. Because you see the people who are the most courageous and who showed the most sort of character in there are not the people who are educated and who've been raised in privilege, but often it's people who formed their own sort of moral standards, and
it's almost a bit
they're the ones who sort of came out better of it. It's a bit what? Sorry,
Grenfell, like Grenfell Tower.
Yes, yeah. How they were, So yes, they've certainly got those elements. But when you see one of the rescuers of one of the characters is part of this sort of anarchist group, and when they talk about anarchy, they basically talk about they want the right to vote and they want to have free education and things like that. So their sort of radical ideas are not that radical to our minds. But in these things, you do get sort of murders, you get romance, you get sort of family tensions and politics and all sorts of things all tied up in it. So it's not just the simple story. It sort of takes this sort of historical premise and then builds a drama upon it.
Oh wow!
But yeah, I found it was I really enjoyed it. I thought if you don't like subtitles, then it's probably a non-starter. But I don't mind subtitles or foreign language films at all. And I just found it really engrossing. I really enjoyed it.
All right, and you started talking about the women in the program. So does it really look at that whole sexism back then or something like that? Because obviously
there's certainly elements that one of the women, the young girl who's like she's just making her debut in society, but she's engaged.
Yeah, and
you see her. She's been raised in a certain way with an expectation that she'll marry the man that her parents have chosen her, and this is the first time during this incident where her fiancé basically leaves her in the fire, and the man who rescues her is one of these anarchists, and she becomes drawn to this anarchist. So she suddenly sees a different a different perspective. She's no longer content to just do what she's told anymore, because she can see that the man that's supposed to protect her, her fiance, left her, and the man who came into the fire and saved her is this sort of peasant who's supposed to be beneath her and is supposed to be without honour and without dignity.
Yeah.
Whereas he's the one who was the most courageous. And so she turns her world upside down, as it does with all these women. So yeah, you certainly see how it's the beginning of almost like her liberation, in that she sees that the life she's lived is not necessarily the ideal that she thought it was. Yeah, and all the ones she wants. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So how many stars would you give it?
So I would give this a high 3. I think it is. Yeah, it's a good drama. I would definitely give it a high 3.
All right, yeah, okay, now that's good on my list. Seen as ever since Charlie's Angels, I now consider myself woke. So, as you're so woke to the issue of women on screen. Right.
But the first episode is absolutely stunning. I have to say, the fire. I almost felt like traumatized afterwards. The way they filmed it was absolutely terrifying and engrossing. You can imagine just the horror of it. Of this event. So I would say, yeah, even if you don't want to watch the whole series, watch the first episode, because I've never seen a sort of film fire done in such a way that you really feel for the sort of fear that the people would have felt trapped in this building. Worth a watch, definitely.
Awesome, thank you. And now we go back to cinema. And Shaun, this is where we get to feel a bit like we're actual, like you were just talking about the film program or something like that. This is where we get to feel like we're actual, journalists, because we're talking about a film that has not been released yet, that is not on general release. And the next
I think it's released tomorrow, isn't it?
It is released tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's released tomorrow,
so instead of saying we saw this in the cinema, you can go see it in the cinema, hurry up, it's almost out of the cinemas, we can say, by the way, this weekend, for your viewing pleasure, you might want to see Bombshell. So, Shaun,
Bombshell, yeah.
Shaun, you saw this at a Cineworld preview. So tell us.
Preview, I did, yeah.
And so, okay. Yeah, tell us about Bombshell.
Okay, Bombshell is basically the story of Fox News. Everybody's heard of Fox News, haven't they? And it's where these women finally, with like all the Harvey Weinstein and all the
Me Too.
That's it, Me Too, yeah. Well, they decide, because of certain things, it starts off with one of the women, she gets a bit uppity about, it's in the trailers anyway, but she gets a bit uppity because it's mentioned that, she's been called a skirt and a few things like that. So she decides to make a little bit of a stand, and she pops in to see these attorneys of us, and they say, well, it's all right, but do you think there's going to be any more people that will come forward? Are there going to be any more people? Because just saying what you're saying on your own is, it's not going to get you anywhere or anything like that, because obviously these big news networks, pretty powerful people. You got some pretty powerful people at the top. So yeah, it's basically the story, and then certain circumstances happen, and blah blah blah, and there's like a news reporter who is absolutely like at the top of the game. One of them's at the top of the game.
Megyn Kelly.
And and is it Megyn Kelly? Yeah, Megyn Kelly. Yeah. So she decides that's what she's going to do. So it all comes down to this. So you've got, it's very much, if you like your politics, if you like things in politics, I think it's quite a good movie to watch. It's done by the makers of Spotlight, which I thought, did you see Spotlight, Sharon?
I did see Spotlight.
Spotlight was great.
Yeah.
So all these type of films, and the acting is absolutely first class, really, I think. Hats off. These are like, Margot Robbie can't do anything wrong for me. I think she's brilliant in anything. She's like my fave, Yeah. Everything from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to Tarzan. She's so versatile. Harley Quinn, just all of them. She's like absolutely brilliant. And then you've got Nicole Kidman, who,
she looks a bit weird. Is that just because she's been made up to look like the actual?
It's Charlize Theron who looks weird.
Oh, I thought they both looked weird. But have they been made up then to make themselves look more like the real women?
Because Megyn Kelly, who Charlize Theron plays, is actually a very, very well-known person, and she has a very, very sort of like distinct look. And Charlize Theron has prosthetics on her face to look more like Megyn Kelly, and it is actually quite shocking what they've done. She does look quite a bit like Megyn Kelly. She's known because Fox News obviously is known as like the conservative thing, and Megyn Kelly is a bit of a hate figure for the left, because she keeps saying all these things and people are like, oh, for goodness sake, what's wrong with you? You're Republican, this and that, da, 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 da. So,
right.
So Megyn Kelly's well known and Charlize Theron plays her.
Well,
Sean, you were saying about the
and she's like my second favourite actress after Margot Robbie. So, I mean, that is Charlie, Theron is just, I mean, I loved her everything from Mad Max Fury Road to, I think she's been the best evil queen in the history of cinema. I know the film wasn't particularly good, but
Snow White and the Huntsman.
That's it. She was just hateful. So, and I mean, monster. She was a monster, wasn't she? I mean, she's great. So, you got a powerhouse cast here. Yes. And even, I mean, I didn't realise that Fox was owned by the Murdochs, by Rupert Murdoch.
It is, yeah.
And you've got Malcolm McDowell playing Robert Murdoch, and I'm not kidding. He is, I mean, perhaps he's got prosthetics. Perhaps they've all got prosthetics, but he looks the spit of Rupert Murdoch. He looks absolutely like, it's like.
Oh, that's cool because I haven't seen Malcolm McDowell on anything for ages. It's good to see him back.
Yeah. So it's basically the story, and there's I think it's in, and also this is in the trailer, is the scene. There's a scene in the lift because they don't really know. Well, they're aware of each other, or two of them are aware of each other. Perhaps the other one isn't, but the other one knows. Obviously knows who they are. And you've got them in the lift. You've got the three of them in the lift, and you can just sort of see. And I mean, to me, that is an absolutely brilliant scene because you don't know, whether there's a bit of jealousy there or what's going on, or
So Sean, you were mentioning that you said from the makers of Spotlight, and Spotlight, a great film, and it's pretty much just a procedural that this is how we went from this point to finding out these people and exposing these priests who had done all these abuse and the cover by the Catholic Church. So is Bombshell a bit like that? It's kind of like, okay, cool. This is how we had the Me Too moment in Fox News, where this is how it started off. This is where we went through, and this is how we got to the point where we took down this man who had been using his position to abuse all these women. Yeah,
that's about the sum of it. I think Toast is that's the story.
Yeah, and from what I hear, it isn't too straightforward. Like you were talking about the different women and about how there's bits about the different women and how they come at it from different angles. It asks the question whether some of the women were complicit in the abuse or complicit in the cover-up of the abuse and stuff like that. Does it go that way? Or is it just kind of like, women right, man wrong?
Probably more women right, man wrong. But I would say, there's not, they don't, I mean, it's not really much of a cover-up. They're not trying to cover up. It just sort of snowballs into something that becomes something really big and quite uncontrollable. So certain things have to happen. Hence, the Murdochs getting involved. So, and is it John Lithgow? Yeah,
he's
one of them. I've seen him in the trailer.
He plays Roger Ailes, who's the main guy who set up Fox News, and this is pretty much what brought him down.
Yeah. Well, it would have done. So, but so I would say that. This to me, this film, I would have to say it's probably, for me, this would probably be a 3-star. I'm not going to say it's, but a high 3-star. Not, but the acting from the three main protagonists is spot on. And as I say, they're just great. They're just great. I could watch those guys all the time, really. Yeah. And quite a good supporting cast, but it's not like It's worth a watch. It's definitely worth a watch if you like that sort of film.
All right, look. You see, the thing is, I'm actually looking forward to watching this film next week when it comes out, because I reckon for me, this film, I look at this film and think this film should be at least a 4. So I would be interested to watch it and see how opinions, if they do differ, I'll be interested to see that. All right, thanks.
Yeah, it would be quite interesting that. As I say, I'm going to try and see some other stuff as well. So I'll try and catch up on some of the stuff you've seen.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, there's something on Sky, on Now TV at the moment called The Loudest Voice, which is about this same guy, Roger Ailes, who but he's played by the character that John Lithgow plays, but it's played by Russell Crowe. And I think it's about the same thing. It's about how he came down. Russell Crowe just won an award for playing him. And I
won the Golden Globes, wasn't it?
Yeah, he won one of the Golden Globes. And I would actually quite like to put them beside each other and see, it'll make an interesting double bill, Bombshell and The Loudest Voice. But okay, now we go back to Netflix and Friends to watch a show that only Sharon has seen, with a title that I'm going to be honest, Sharon, I'm a bit surprised that you're the one who's seen this. This is a show called Harlots, which I've always seen the title and thought, what? No, I'm not watching that. So, but seeing as this is season 3 that you're reviewing, I think you have actually been with this show for a while. So tell us, explain yourself.
Yeah.
Explain yourself.
It started off on ITV, actually, just a television drama. And basically, as it's about the lives of a group of prostitutes who, in 18th century London, where at that time in London, 1 in 6 women was a prostitute.
Wow.
Because basically your options you were either married, you were in service, or you were a prostitute. You didn't have many options. So this basically is the story of a group of harlots, as they were called, and it's based on a book that was published at the time. I think it's something like Covent Garden's Guide to Harlots, and every prostitute within that square mile were rated by this one particular punter, basically were. Yeah, he described them and their sort of attributes and their capabilities, as it were, and he basically rated them. And this is a genuine book that you can still get hold of the sort of facsimiles of it. But in the beginning, the very first series, you basically you sort of step into this world of what it was like to be a harlot in those days, and you realise that there is, as with all these things, there is a hierarchy. That you have got, if we start at the bottom and go up, at the bottom you've got basically women who sell their wares on the streets to sailors at the docks and to anyone on a street corner. They are regarded as being like the common trolls, as they were called.
Yeah.
And then a step up from that is if you actually were part of a bawdy house. And a bawdy house, as opposed to a brothel, a bawdy house is actually run by women, and the bawds are ex-prostitutes themselves who then run their own houses. So they're not pimped. The women are running these bawdy houses.
Yeah.
And then alongside those, you've got molly houses. And a molly house is a house that is run for basically the homosexual trade. So you've got male prostitutes were called mollies. And so you would have houses basically that would be they would disguise themselves as women, so that it would look like a bawdy house, but actually, if they catered for men with male prostitutes, then they're molly houses.
Hang on. Need to take some notes. This is getting complicated.
And this is just like a social history lesson. And then above that, you have the demi-monde.
This is really interesting.
And then you've got what's
a demi-monde?
The demi-monde is basically where you are a prostitute still, but you move within society. So you have a place on the fringes of polite society. So you can go to balls, you meet the politicians of the day, you meet the aristocracy, and they tend to be kept. Now, a kept woman is basically someone who is. There's a contract between their keeper and the escort, and they're given an allowance, they're given clothes, and they're given somewhere to live. And so that's a step up from being part of a boarding house.
Yeah. And
then the proper demi-monde is basically if you become the mistress of a mistress rather than just a courtesan, and then you're fully immersed in someone's life. So the king's mistresses will be completely accepted in society, and their children would be acknowledged as the children of their keeper, or in the king's case. So they have a place in society of their own.
Yeah.
So you've got this sort of like hierarchy. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So, or just because I know that we're running out of time here. So we have all this kind of stuff. My main thing with a show like this is, how does it keep from becoming just kind of like, salacious and exploitative?
Well, there are sexual scenes, but going back to my old code of contact, there's no nipples in it. It's actually quite. You can see often. You see there like these bored women's expressions as this man sort of does what he has to do, and so it's all from the woman's perspective, and It's actually fantastic drama. And in season 3, you have like a good guys and you have the bad guys, and the good guys are basically this one group of boards who live in the Wells family, and then you versus Olivia Quigley, who's basically the worst type of madam.
Yeah.
Where she will, and there's running alongside this, there's a group of men that call themselves the Spartans, and they're very much based on the Hellfire Club, where basically they get their kicks out of sailing on the edge of what's legal, and it goes beyond that. So they take pleasure in abducting young maids and drugging them, and then their virginity is auctioned.
Oh,
and
God.
The Spartans regard themselves as being like take first blood, they say get kudos from that, and then they ultimately become a Spartan when they kill someone. And so you've got alongside this sort of the story of these boards, you've got this sort of drama alongside where some of the prostitutes want to protect these sort of maids and some of these just ordinary girls from being dragged into this life that they wouldn't recommend necessarily.
Yep.
And then you've got Olivia Quigley, who's basically staying one side of the noose, basically, because she has colluded in the abduction and the rape and murder of innocent young girls. And she does she is a keeper of secrets, so she does bribe people and blackmail people. And so you've got, there's intrigue, there's drama, there's crime, there's lust, there's love, there's fear, there's all in here. This is probably, I think, I read one review and they said this is the best drama that you've never heard of.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Never. You give me a whole history lesson then. I mean, it's
absolutely engrossing. I watched all 3 seasons, and because you think it is going to be salacious, it's all going to be like, well, hey, get your kit off, love. It actually isn't. There's a lot of sex scenes in it, but the most you see is like some buttocks and a suggestion of nudity, but you don't see anything.
Is there? What I was going to ask you, is it like, does it get samey? Because I thought Peaky Blinders got samey. It was really, really good to start with, and then it's just
Olivia Quigley is the main sort of villainess.
Oh, right.
And every time she sort of dodges the noose, she's like going, oh, for goodness sake, just hang her.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
So that can be, get a little bit fed up with her. But the fact that she claws her way up from, she's committed to Bedlam at one point, and the fact that she sort of claws her way back out of Bedlam, and you see what Bedlam was like. We tend to think of it as like the Bethlehem Hospital. We tend to think of it as just being we don't really think of it in real terms, and this sort of shows you just how dreadful it actually was. That people would pay to come and watch the people being fed or being treated, and this treatment is little short of torture or molestation. So I would. It's a great drama. I really would rate it.
How many stars would you give it?
I'd give it a 4-star.
All right, 4 stars for Harlots. That's one of those.
Harlots.
It's one of those words.
That's interesting.
It's one of those words you can't think about too hard before you say it. Because I'm like, Harlots. You can't think about it too hard before you say it. All right.
And it's been interesting. Actually, just one last word on it. And the 3rd season particularly, it does dip into the world of slavery, anti-slavery, and the role that Black people played in 18th century London. How there's a lot of emancipated slavery, and also people who were brought into England as like small children to become like pages and stuff. What happens to them when they grow up? So you see a whole sort of line of this 3rd season particularly. You do see a lot about the early movements towards emancipation and of the abolishing of the slave trade, and you sort of get a different glimpse of 18th century London through the eyes of some Black characters as well. So to me that was really interesting, because I'm aware of things like the Zong case, but this like takes you into what happens to like the Piccaninnies, as they were called, not a word we use now, but what happened to them is they're in the portraits of people, but what happened to that child when they grew up? Well, in Harlots you find out. So I would 4 stars for me.
All right, okay, cool. You know how to press my buttons, Sharon. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going from talk about one experience of black people to another film that has experience of black people. Now, this is going to cinema, and we're talking about Just Mercy, which is also out this weekend, which we can tell you what it's going to be like. Now, this is a film that is based on a true life story. It stars Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Lee Foxx. What? Jamie Lee Foxx. No, it stars Michael
Jamie Lee Foxx. That's like Olivia Allen-John.
No, it starts Michael B. Jordan, and Jamie Foxx, and it's this is based on a true story. So it's one of those films that it's essentially based on a true story about a black man who gets unfairly accused, and it's a good film. However, the problem with this is that I feel like this is a certain type of film, and that if you've seen some films, you've seen this film. Like, Sean, I know you saw Marshall with Chadwick Boseman.
Marshall, yeah.
All about Thurgood Marshall. And if you've seen Marshall, you've seen this film. And if you've
Right, okay.
and if you've seen When They See Us, you've seen this film. And even though that's the case, I still think that films like this need to be made, because the fact is that Marshall, I mean, that's Thurgood Marshall. That's set in I think it's set in the 50s. That's set in the 50s. And then this film is set in the 80s. It starts in the 80s, goes into the 90s, and it's the same thing. And it's the same thing that happens. Same thing that happens again. So essentially, even when you look at the case in Marshall and the case in this, it's pretty much Michael B. Jordan plays Brian Stevenson, who is he's a Harvard-educated lawyer. He comes out of Harvard Law School, but he decides, instead of going to work for a big, massive law firm, what he wants to do is he wants to help people who have been wrongly convicted on death row. So he goes to Alabama, and his mom is like really scared about him going there. It's like, you know what they're like in Alabama. Like, there's just racists down in Alabama, and they could kill you for, like, looking at them funny and all that. But he says, no, I want to go down to Alabama because there's people who have been unfairly convicted, and he wants to represent them properly. So he's gotten some money from the government to set up something called the Equal Justice Initiative. He goes down there and he meets Jamie Foxx's character called Walter McMillan, otherwise known as Johnny D, who has been arrested and sentenced to death, even though all the evidence says he didn't do it. Like, at the time when he was supposed to have killed this 18-year-old white girl, he was actually at a family barbecue, and there are 30 different witnesses who said yes, he was at the barbecue, including a policeman. But because they were all black, they all got ignored, and then they take the the testimony of a white career criminal who says, yeah, he was with me, he made me drive him, all that kind of stuff, I saw him kill this woman. And they lock him up and send him to jail, even though all the evidence says he did not do it, that there is no way he could possibly have done it. And so, and from there, it's essentially a case, it follows a true story of how they went from there and how they managed to get this guy his freedom back. That's what, and as I said, I feel like if you've seen Marshall, you've seen this film. When They See Us, you've seen this film. If we even go onto like the fictional ones, like To Kill a Mockingbird or Time to Kill.
I was going to mention To Kill a Mockingbird, but there's a Gene Hackman film, isn't there? And that's based on a true. Yes. Is it called The Klansman?
Mississippi Burning, I think.
Mississippi Burning, that's the one. Yeah, that's a great film as well. That's a really good film.
So the thing. That's where. Yeah, so the thing about it is, because this is more about the court case and everything like that. So I think it's a story that needs to keep being told, and you need to keep putting the real life stories or the real life things that these people have gone through. But and I think for that, the film has a lot of value. But as a film itself, I mean, if as a narrative, you feel like you've seen it all before, and which is something which, and I think that probably tells you more about the state of the world that we're in. That this just keeps happening, that this just keeps happening, and it needs to keep being said, and we need to keep talking about it, because I have a film that's set in the 50s, we have one that's set in the 80s, we have one that's set in the 90s, and the same thing keeps happening. So it's and it just tells you, like, for me anyway, what I took away from it is, oh my god, there's just such a long way to go, because even though I'm looking at this film thinking I've seen it before, at the same time I'm still thinking, but it still needs to be said. So as a film, I would give it a 3 out of 5. I think the performances are good, but I don't really think that there's much that they can do with it's. This is the story. This is what happened. But as I said, it hits a lot of the same beats that it hits in other places. But 3
What's the acting like? Is the acting good? Is the acting good?
The acting is
Jamie
good.
Foxx.
Jamie Foxx, Michael B. Jordan, Rafe Spall.
Because it's just that Michael, I was going to say Michael J. Fox for a minute, but no, we're all getting our names wrong today, aren't we?
Yeah.
But Jamie Foxx. To me, he's great in some things and then not so good in other things.
Yeah, it can vary.
Yeah,
He
I agree.
varies a lot.
I agree. He's really good in this.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he's really good in this. I think I do think it's a bit linear, but he is really good in this. People have been saying before the Oscars came out and whatever the controversy about that's for another day. But before that, people were talking about, these guys are Oscar worthy. I don't really think so. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, I don't think at least their performances are up there. But I think that's partly because of what they have to work with. I mean, it's really, really good for what they have to work with, but the story is very, very linear, and it's kind of like, you know what's going to happen. But anyway, that's it for me. 3 stars for Just Mercy. Right, and now we go back to Netflix and Friends, and we go to Vienna Blood. And this, once again, Sharon, you're like a Netflix person this week. So
yeah, I think this was because it won't come as any surprise to anyone who's living in Great Britain at the moment. We've had a lot of rain. And raining and gardening don't actually always go well together.
Yes.
Not when you want to be out there digging and it's frightful. So I've had a lot of spare time this last month. So I've actually, and during the day especially, I've had days off when don't normally have days off. So I have had unlimited access to the television and the Now TV and the Netflix box, basically.
Yes.
So I have been catching up on all my televisual stuff. But this is Vienna Blood is actually a BBC drama, so it's available on iPlayer, and I watched it as a download off the iPlayer, so it is available without having to pay a fee.
Okay, cool.
For it, and it's
apart from your television license, apart from your TV license.
That's what your TV license fee. Yeah, so it isn't exactly free then. So I seem to be like Mrs. Period drama this week, but I must admit that is where I'm drawn to. I do like sort of a non-contemporary drama, even if it's sort of fantasy and stuff. That's more my bag.
Okay, so
Sharon, I'm just going to quickly go off on a tangent, which you would love and you should listen to. It's been all this week. You might better catch up on it. But it's all about literature. Quarter to 10. So from 9 o'clock, they have like really good stuff on Radio 4, isn't it? But they have all this week for 15 minutes as people. And today was about women's. Well, it's all about women's, but it's all about. So you would love it. It's been all week. It's been all week.
That's worth checking out then.
Yeah, you would really like that. That'd be right up the street.
Yeah, so I do like sort of my period drama, and I do like my fantasy. So that's where I tend to head when I have a spare moment. So Vienna Blood is another one of my sort of historical dramas. This one is coming back. Vampires, yeah. But there's no vampires in this one. Okay. This is actually crime, a sort of historic crime drama.
Right.
And it is set in Vienna, as you would imagine, in the turn of the century, so it's early 20th century. So we've gone from, we've covered the sort of the centuries this program.
Yeah.
And this is early 1900, early 20th century Vienna, and it's the beginning of the use of psychology, as in Sigmund Freud, and the people were trying to explore the human condition through how the mind works and how some physical conditions are not actually physical, they're more mental.
Yeah.
And so we see our main characters, 2 main characters. Our first main character is Max Lieberman, who is a student of Sigmund Freud, but he's also a doctor. He works in a psychiatric hospital, but he's looking at more of what they call the talking cure for these things. And he has been asked to assist in the investigation of a crime with a Vienna police officer, basically to see if there's a psychological reason behind some of these crimes, because some of them don't make sense. Yeah. And there's 3 episodes of this Vienna Blood, and each one takes a different crime. And you see, as he sort of, first of all, he just like walks along because he wants to observe about what happens in a crime investigation, and can you use the talking cure to understand why people do certain crimes. And he meets up with this detective Oscar Reinhardt, and they become this unlikely sort of duo where they collaborate in the investigation of these 3 crimes. The first episode is the murder of a medium, a site, a woman who, and they first of all they want to find out, is she making it all up? Is she a fraud? And what is behind that? So they try to use his expertise in a psychologist to do that.
Okay.
The next one is the series of brutal murders of a group of women. And then the third one is a story set in a boys' school, a military school. And so again, you see different aspects of how psychology has developed over the course of this investigation.
Is it like an early 20th century CSI?
I haven't watched that, but yes, it's using more than just a whodunit. It's looking into if they arrest a murderer, or when they try to find out who the murderer is, they look into the psychology of why they've done it, as well as the modus operandi. So it takes a step beyond just the usual historical crime drama. But I found it really good. I really enjoyed it. I liked the characterizations of them all, and especially one of them, the Max Lieberman, as you can probably guess by the name, he's a Jew, and this is this is set in Vienna, and it's before the First World War. So you're beginning to see the seeds are sown towards what became the sort of strong anti-Jewish feeling, how sort of Jews are demonized and they're sort of discriminated against, and you're beginning to see the rise of things that became the Reich later on. And so it's interesting when we can sort of see the early signs of what was later become. So I really enjoyed it, actually. The murders are quite gruesome and they're quite graphic, and the depiction of how people are treated for sort of mental disorders in the early 20th century are just horrific. And so we're jolly glad that we don't get committed for being traumatized and having stress. So yes, there's two characters I thought were really interesting. You get to see their lives, you get to see a bit about them, so it's a sort of more of a fleshed out drama, and this unlikely duo. But no, I found it engrossing and enjoyable and an entertaining watch.
How many stars?
I would give it a high 3. A high 3.
High 3. Ooh, Sharon stingy this week. All right, cool. And now we're gonna rush. We're gonna rush ahead, and we're gonna see if we can do the rest of these things in 3 minutes each. And
that's it. No more.
No more.
What are we gonna do?
Okay, so
no more than 3 minutes. That's
no more than 3 minutes. All right, cool. Because you guys have to head to the quiz. So now we're gonna go into Seberg.
Well, you can talk about Seberg.
Okay, so Seberg. I'm guessing this is about Jean. Is it Jean or Jean Seberg?
Jean
Seberg, actress, really famous in the New Wave cinema in France. She was really popular. She made a couple of movies. Sharon called the movie because we went to see this together. Sharon.
I know her from.
But,
whoa! What is that?
There you go. We've even got some music to beat.
That's a dramatic moment.
That was a dramatic moment.
I knew her from Paint Your Wagon.
Yeah, Paint Your Wagon. I know. It was like, oh wow, because they didn't actually say Paint Your Wagon. They just said, the Western movie.
Yeah,
and
the musical.
Yeah, the musical Western. And I was saying, I was thinking musical Western. And then Sharon said Paint Your Wagon, and it's like, oh yeah, of course. So you paint anyway. Basically, but she supports the Black Panther movement, and she supports some civil rights groups. And the FBI get wind of this, and so they just totally try to destroy her, to defame her, to every possible thing they could do. They spread lies about her. I didn't know very much about. I'd heard the name, but
I certainly didn't. I wasn't aware of the events.
No, I wasn't aware of the events of what went on with the relationship she had with
Black Panthers.
Minute and a half.
So the Black Panthers, other people. And it's just like a hatchet job, Okay, let's find.
She's been, the FBI target her, and from that moment on, they do everything they can to discredit her, to undermine her, and then also to try to destroy her mentally as well.
For sure, yeah.
They almost wage this sort of psychological warfare on her.
Really nasty stuff.
Well, she's sort of, even though they can see that she's basically having a complete breakdown and other events happen, they don't let up at all. They're just relentless in their pursuit of her, because they regard her as being like the communists were in the 50s. They regard her as being an enemy of the state, effectively. They weren't having any of it, were they?
No, they weren't, not at all. It was all very much very much they weren't having it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask a couple of questions because we have about 40 seconds allocated.
Right. Okay. Go.
So Kristen Stewart plays Jane Seberg. Good.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I thought she was good.
All right.
Not perfect, and I didn't think she looked much like her, really. But no, she was very good. She played it convincingly.
She did. I looked at some pictures actually when I got in, and
Yes, I did.
and there are a few where she looked similar. I thought similar, but like you say, not.
It's all the
That's
haircut.
fine.
Isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah, it's
They
the
got the
haircut.
haircut right.
Yeah.
So the main thing about this film is just about what the persecution of Jane Seberg for having
Yes.
political views, quite frankly.
And
Yes.
other things. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that she had this interracial relationship as well, they seem to target her more particularly than they probably would a man in the same
yeah,
situation.
definitely.
They just went all out for her.
Yeah.
The fact that she was a Hollywood actress and she had an affair with a black man. They were like, well, she's obviously degenerate.
Yeah. It didn't actually. When I did the research, it didn't actually say that.
No, it doesn't say.
It doesn't say that she. But I mean, so that might have been a bit of Hollywood.
Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. Wait, it doesn't say that she was in a relationship, so I reckon that was just sort of like put on by Hollywood.
Well, I think she was, but I think it was private because they spread all sorts of rumours about it. But there's some elements of truth in that.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I know we've had to rush through that. But how many stars would you give that?
I'll give it 3.
Yeah, I'll give it a 3 as well. Definitely a 3.
All right.
Yeah. I enjoyed it actually quite a lot. It was pretty good. It was quite interesting because I didn't know nothing about it. I'd heard the name and I knew nothing about it.
Yeah, I knew some facts about her. I knew her some early, and I knew how the end of her story, but I didn't know this bit in the middle.
Right.
All right. Okay, cool. Now, I've got to let you guys go, but quickly before we go, to make this thing even, I'm going to talk about Bojack Horseman Season 6. Now, Bojack Horseman, we've spoken about this on the show before because, Sean, you sort of like stumbled across this on Netflix. And
I did, yeah.
And you mentioned at that time that it was the kind of thing that you just kept watching. You watch one episode and you just watch the next one, and before you know, you finish the season. And it just sort of like sucks you in. And Bojack Horseman is the kind of show that I find it hard to say what makes it good, but I know it's awesome. I know it's a brilliant show. It is one part sort of like, satire of Hollywood. It is one part talking about the human condition, even though almost everybody in it is an animal. It is, and it just, but I feel it does this whole thing of being really, really funny, being very satirical, but also being very, very human. And it's a bit like, I guess it's a bit like talking about the Detectorists, where Sharon, you were talking about how much you think it's amazing. And I remember how when Nina's husband Will was trying to explain to me, he was just kind of like, it's funny, but it's human, and it's I don't know. And I think I feel a little bit like that about Bojack Horseman. It is animated, so Sharon, I know you might have to sort of grit your teeth, but if you did, it's a very, very good show. And season 6 just carries on, and I am actually really, really surprised that they've kept the quality up this long. I'm really surprised that the quality has carried on for 6 seasons. It is still really, really good, and there's still episodes where you go, oh my god, they didn't do that. There's episodes where it does things like talk about working mothers in Hollywood. It talks and the whole arc of season 6 is Bojack Horseman becoming more of a human, even though he is a horse. But he's becoming more of a human. He's becoming more like, empathetic, and he's beginning to realize that the destructive Hollywood lifestyle that he's lived up to this point might not be the best way. Might not have been the best for him. And even though that sounds very much like, a Hallmark movie of the week, and it sounds very sort of like Lifetime, and it sounds very sort of twee, the way this show does it, the way this show actually, is somebody packing up a bag in the background?
That's me. I'm just doing a zip up.
Yeah, I could just hear like
my flies out.
I could just hear like a zip going up, or like I just hear like something being chucked in. It's kind of like, yeah, bye. But anyway, the way they do his rehab journey and everything like that in this is actually really, really, really well done. It is so well handled, and it's believable. That's the great thing about this show, is that no matter how absurd it gets and no matter how far it gets, all of the emotions are always believable, and that's why Bojack Horseman is one of my favorite animated things of all time. Even possibly above.
High praise, because you are a bit of an animation fan, aren't you?
Well, yeah. When I'm talking about TV series, it's probably one of my favorite ones. Yeah. Possibly even above The Simpsons in its good years. But I just think what they do with this show is magical, and so I would give this a 4 out of 5 for Bojack Horseman season 6. All right, cool. Good. that puts us to the end, and all there's left to say is, guys, guess what? Guess who won this week? Netflix or cinema? Netflix or cinema? Who won? Who won?
Netflix.
Cinema.
Netflix, I reckon.
Ooh. Well, one of them got 3.5, and one of them got 3.4.
Oh, I think with the 5 scores for 1917, I think Cinema's pipped it, but I could be wrong.
Unfortunately, Sharon, you are wrong. Netflix just pipped it. Netflix was trailing behind. It was trailing behind until I went and gave Bojack Horseman a 4.
Yeah.
My Vienna Blood and my what was the other one? I've lost it already.
Well, Bonfire of Destiny.
Bonfire of Destiny.
Harlots.
They were borderline 4s, so that would have been more decisive from the next one anyway.
Yeah.
You were harsh this week, though.
I was a bit harsh.
You
because I thought I'm going to give everything a 4 otherwise. So I thought, no, I'm going to have to be a bit more discriminating.
Yeah.
Well,
that was me with Seberg. I mean, I was. And then I thought, now I can't. Because I don't want too generous today.
Well, that's until I go and see Bombshell and give it a 4. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right, and okay. And all that's left to say is a goodbye from me.
A goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.
We will see you next week. Now, you guys fly, you fools. Go to the quiz.